Hello and welcome to the Omnex webinar, IATF 16949 Grand Finale and AIAG VDA Update. Today's presenter is Chad Keimel. Chad Keimel is the CTO and founder of Omnex. Omnex is an international consulting and training organization headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with offices all around the world. Over the course of Chad's successful career, he has served on the Malcolm Baldrige Board of Examiners and received numerous quality achievement awards, including the Quality Professional of the Year Award from the ASQ Automotive Division. Chad is also the president of Omnex Systems, a software provider for many quality management systems, including risk tools and FEMA and control plans. Chad is the author of 7 books, including several on integrated management systems and more than 100 papers. During this webinar, if you have any questions for Chad, enter them in your questions dialog box, and Chad will get to them at the end of the presentation. Go ahead, take it away, Chad.
Miles, thank you, and welcome everyone. This is the 4th and what we call I called the IATF 16949 Grand Finale. Of course, it's not the end to the IATF 16949 by any means, but this big transition that we started on, the standard came out in October, but if you do recall, a couple of months before the standard, I did a webinar for you when the standard was still in draft state. So since then, every few months, I've been giving you an update to what's happening with the standard, and so this is being done at the correct juncture, I feel, where I can finish this transition and give you the data on the transition. I'm hoping that takes about 30 minutes of time here in this hour and a half, and then I spend the next 45 minutes actually talking to you about what's coming next into what we'll be calling supply chain standards. And I hope it's something that is meaningful and adds to your understanding of what's ahead of us. So let's go to the agenda. I'll just mention to you as I work my way through the front. Omnex was founded in 1985. We work with all different standards, including Lean Six Sigma. We're headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We do a lot of work, of course, in the automotive industry, and very proud of the fact we helped Ford Motor Company with their emerging market strategy. Also, that we had a big part to play with the semiconductor industry and having helped write the semiconductor supplement to the ISO TS 16949. In Omnex MITS, you will find IATF delegates, writers of the AIAG quality manual. We've had the ISO 26262 committee members, and we also have the member who is part of the Cybersecurity standards for SAE, was a part of the ISO Cybersecurity standards. In fact, these are some of the new areas that the automotive industry is getting into, and because of that, different standards will come into importance. Just a mention about our enterprise quality software, which has a APQP solution integrated with a functional safety solution. We have an integrated management system solution, or an enterprise quality solution, and a supplier quality solution used by thousands of companies globally. Something Omnex claims, and is very proud of, is the global reach of our consultants and our offices, and the ability to serve companies like Magna and others in 26 different languages. Let's go ahead then and talk to you a little bit about what we are here to talk about, which is the IATF 16949. We'll analyze the total minors and majors and look at the certification status. And most importantly, this information we feel is going to help you maintain your certification. As I'll quote somebody now who mentioned this to me, last year when this director of many plants in the U.S. saw a really weak plant that he expected to really fail the audit that passed, and he saw several others pass. He said, Chad, I think the registration audits are going to be easy. The really tough audits are going to be the surveillance audits. And folks, this is what we're seeing today. We're getting people coming to us with majors in the surveillance audits that wasn't caught in the registration audit. All right, so keep that in mind as I go through this update of minors and majors. And then what we'll do is we'll segue into strategic changes and implications and talk to you about the AIAG VDA as part of the supply chain standards and part of the changes that are coming upon us. And of course, in fact, I'm going to tell you that all these standards are coming at the same time, but maybe AIAG VDA will get maybe a first importance. So let's move on then and talk to you, and let's start with this press release that started things off on August 9th. It says a new evolution for the quality management in the automotive industry, and it released the standard IATF 16949 in October of 2016. If you do recall, why the standard, and was as important as it is, it had major changes in the IATF portion, and at the same time, ISO 9001:2015 changed in a major way. Both these changes really is what I called, and I'm just going to remind you, if you don't remember, I was one of the writers of the QS 9000, helping Ford Motor Company in the background in terms of when the QS 9000 first came out. I also happen to have done the first worldwide witness audit for QS 9000 as a lead auditor for a registrar. And I looked at this change that happened in 2016 as the biggest change that hit the automotive industry since QS 9000. And really, along with these two in red, you need to also look at the one in the bottom, customer-specific requirements. Though these requirements were there all along, finally we realized how to deal with customer specifics. But I'll tell you, as I say it happens to be the biggest, the topmost common major nonconformance. So it tells us, yes, it's there, and companies are still struggling to deal with these customer specific requirements. More about it later. Folks, for those of you listening in, not only do you need to know the IATF, the ISO 9001:2015, and your CSRs, you also need to know the automotive certification scheme to be fully knowledgeable about what's IATF 16949. Along with this, of course, are the core tools. And these core tools have been here since 1995, thereabouts. Actually, before that, right? But let's say 1995. The competency level still in the industry, is there's still a challenge here in terms of the core tools, right? So IATF 16949, with this two parts of the IATF supplemental and ISO 9000, the CSR and the core tools really makes up this IATF 16949 standard. So looking at the transition timeline, it is a not a current timeline. The timeline is actually past. As we go into and look at the details, we had 3 different times when it came out. October 3rd, 2016. When you could not do any more ISO TS audits was October 2nd, 2017. And now the deadline being September 14, 2018. We look a little later and ask ourselves, how well did we do? So let's hang on. First, let's look at the majors and minors. And for those of you who have been following these webinars all along, know I shared the results of the first audit, the first 181 audits, and then the 3,172 audits. And what you can tell about minors is that they're very, very consistent, and that there's only one change from 181 to 172, and it continued to be consistent here. Now, if we have been smart and had this data, which you did, we could have maybe tried to avoid, these minor nonconformances, the top 10 minor nonconformances. So a very slight shift here, and really, you see the addition of problem solving. Many of these are in the minor column, but also in the major column. All right. So what do we take away from this? Just to see that what the top items were, total productive maintenance, control plan, contingency planning, and actually the ISO part of 8.5.1. You may want to take a good look at that, and then problem solving. Okay, we'll deep dive into 4 of these a little bit later. Now, why are these important? These are important to us because if you didn't find this nonconformance in your registration audit, it'll probably be there for you in your surveillance. Here is the data on the major nonconformances. Look at that. Customer-specific requirements, number 1. Internal auditor competency, number 2. And there's a significant amount of change in the, about 5 of them are new, and some of them actually repeat. When you look at the 5.3, right? Oops. And you see here, customer-specific requirements, internal auditor competency. I'm just going to, jump to control plans, and I'm just going to look at problem solving. Those are some of the key ones I think you need to take a good look at. Of course, contingency planning and total productive maintenance can also be easily fixed. But take a look at your system and make sure these top 10 majors and minors are not there, okay? So just as a reminder, what's an internal auditor competency? Don't forget you have competency for internal auditors, supplier auditors, and process auditors, okay? And then take a look at the CSRs of your customers. If you're especially supplying to GM, there are some key competency requirements for GM suppliers. Next, we have problem solving. Problem solving has many different parts to it. Maybe you're getting these majors are coming from a root cause analysis. That you need to have 3 different types of root causes: escape root cause, occur root cause, system root cause. Or maybe we're not doing a good job of implementing the corrective action or the system corrective action. Okay, what about the control plan? The control plan has 2 key parts to it. One is the linkages between the DFMEA, the process flow, PFMEA, and control plan. Then there's a linkage between these documents and the 8D problem solving. So our problems could be there, or the problems could be in the changes that take place that need to have control plan being reviewed. It's not just a control plan. The process flow, PFEMA, and control plan will have to be reviewed when there are major changes taking place. So, internal auditor competency, problem solving, and control plan. And then we get to the topmost customer-specific requirement, topmost major non-conformance, which is the customer-specific requirements. So, folks, this seems to be a problem. Now, I do know it is a big, big, big deal. But what is being asked is not only do you include it in the scope, but that you have a matrix of all your key customers, which may include OEMs, non-OEMs, IATF OEMs, and other automotive customers. For some of you, this is huge. In fact, I am not quite sure why some of my customers who have 100 or more, of their customers have not gone back and asked for more of a clarification. But folks, this customer-specific requirements continues to be a major issue for many people getting audited. All right. So that's a little bit about what's happening with majors and minors and a need for us to take a look at our systems. Now, you did see some shifts. Folks, I'm going to pause here. Maybe you could use this pause while I drink a little bit of tea to ask any questions you may have. So this is a list of 56 non-conformances after the first 100 and so, there's 181 audits. We analyzed it and said, folks, if you want to be completely bulletproof, focus on these 56 non-conformances, which are the common non-conformances. All right. So this is still there for you from this presentation. Use it to help yourself, especially with this idea of what we experienced last year. First one was, we have many stories. I picked two, which I personally was involved in. The first one there was they actually called us in after they had the registration audit, and they had majors. I think they had one major. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe they had two majors. I don't quite fully recall, but we found a bunch of stuff wrong. And the alarming factor is they got registered about a month later. So the second story is the one before was not a tier one. The second one was a large tier ones, many plants. One of the plants we audited, they called us in 2 weeks before the registration audit, just wanted an internal audit, and it was a blowout. It was worse than a gap analysis because our gap analysis usually are not this bad. We found so many majors. And what happened? And I tell you, we worked very hard to plug as many holes as we could. But when I went in to I did it as a favor to the director of quality. I went in to do a doc review and ended up writing documentation for them. That's how sad it was. And they got registered also, and they got the audit with a few minors. And I can tell you, they were not ready. So hence the quote from the director of one of our major customers who said, the registrar auditors are being easy on the registration audits. The surveillance audits are going to be the real audits for IATF 16949. So let me just leave you with that thought. And indeed, as I mentioned to you, this is what we're finding when people are contacting us this year. Let's continue. Folks, so I'm right on track here. So that what I'd planned to do was take about 30 minutes here on about IATF 16949, and let's finish talking about the IATF with this next set of data, a look at the IATF certifications. If you didn't know this data came from the IATF or the IAOB, maybe from the IAOB, that shows North America is a little less than 10%. That is indeed. Do you see how much is in Mexico? In fact, Mexico, remember, this is manufacturing sites because IATF 16949 is provided to manufacturing sites. It would indeed be interesting to know of the 30,000 sites in China, how many of them belong to the American OEMs, tier ones, and how many in Mexico belong to the US tier ones, right? Wouldn't that be interesting to know? And but you see the landscape of the world changing. Here it is. 30 some years ago, maybe 40 years ago, I worked for the largest OEM in the world, General Motors. When I worked for them, they had 52% of market share. It was also the time when the US government said they were a monopoly and they were looking at breaking General Motors, into its different pieces. So here it is. It tells you the world is ever changing, how the landscape has changed. And indeed, all different parts of the world that automotive industry is spread in. So the biggest markets they see as being the USA, China, and India, right? As the car sales keep going up. Okay, looking at this, let's take a quick look, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here on the IATF certifications, but I'll just tell you this. I have this only, and again, these are slides I already shared with you, actually 2 or 3 presentations ago. Do you see this gap? In January of this year, or last year, there were only 36 tier 1s who had been audited, and only 17% of them had gotten their, certified. So there's a gap of 19%, and that's the time it takes to close out non-conformances. All right, it takes about 3 months to close out non-conformances. Globally, there was 26% had been audited, and 13 had been certified. So we did not think, I'm not going to go through the numbers, we did not think that the tier 1s were going to get finished in time. We thought the tier 1s will take till February of 2019, and we thought globally it would be like April of 2019. All right, I'm going to just look at the extrapolation of the data. Actually, we said globally May 2019, and then March 19 for the tier 1s. Well, the good news is, the IAOB and the registrars got into gear, added, auditors, and 97% were audited by August. Remember, the deadline was in September. They got audited, 97% of the tier 1s, and 74% of them, were registered. Still a gap of 23%. And extrapolating that, well, before that, I'll just mention 78% of global, but 60% of the global, certifications were certified. All right. When you extrapolate it, what do we find? We do find that by mid-2018, I expect to get data on what actually ensued shortly, but by mid-December 2018, so by January 1st, all the tier 1s should have been certified. And then globally, we believe by end of March, they should have been certified. Okay? That's our projection. So congratulations to all of you who got registered, and great work from the IAOB and the registrars. I think we executed it automotive style, and it's a major accomplishment to get all these registrations done. So hats off, folks. I'll just say this also. The quality of the audit needs to be there, and I do believe it'll happen now through the surveillance audit, and so get ready for it. All right. So I'm right on time here to segue into the second part of this webinar, talking about the strategic changes and implications. And then there's a third part where I talk about supply chain standards, right? So let's pause here. I look at my clock, because when you do these webinars, 1 minute sounds like feels like an hour. So I'm going to actually pause here for 2 minutes to allow you to write questions, because we're segueing into a brand new topic. So I will continue then. We are going to answer all the questions. I hope I have about 15 minutes in the tail end to answer questions for you. So thank you for the questions. Let us continue, folks. What is happening in the automotive industry? This industry that really has seen changes, but maybe we haven't recognized it. And these changes have been dramatic, and is going to change even much, much more. So let's take a look and see what is going on. All right, what is going on? Well, number one, the e-car market and competition. So it's very clear there's going to be electric cars and autonomous cars. I'll mention that to you in a second. The industry, folks, the industry as we know it is completely changing. I met one of my classmates. I went to General Motors Institute many moons ago, and he was reminding me that when we went to school, mechanical engineering, we called it ME Auto, was number one. That's what we all thought of. Now, of course, all of us need to add electrical engineering to our repertoire. Luckily for me, I did a mechanical electrical, and I have to tell you, my whole practices for a long time, since I was in powertrain, was all to do with mechanical, right? I was in engineering and manufacturing. So here's the e-car market, and then we find GM is going all electric and autonomous, right? If you don't know, there's a huge push inside GM to go autonomous. Volvo is going autonomous. Porsche says they'll stop doing diesel cars. Countries are saying that they will stop allowing gas and diesel to be, after 2040, France says. Britain says 2040. I thought I saw India there. Yeah, there's India. By 2030. So not only are car companies saying it, countries are saying it, and GM and Volkswagen, two of the largest automotive companies in the world, are saying they're going to stop doing gas cars and diesel cars. So we indeed are going to see a complete change in the product mix and what each of us are going to be manufacturing as we are part of the supply chain, okay? So what does this mean? Well, really, what the pundits are saying is that all of us, as the autonomous car comes into play, the level 5 autonomous, we will be going into what they call mobility behavior, or we'll be sharing cars. So we share cars. Will the market go up, car market go up or down? What they're saying is the car market revenue is going to increase by 30%. A huge amount of new revenue coming in, and it's for the taking of who is able to come in and make the cars of the future. That's why you're seeing Google, you're seeing Microsoft you're seeing Uber, you're seeing many new Apple, all of them are new entrants into the car industry, all thinking that they can take a piece of this USD trillion, and many of them feel they are more able than the existing car companies to face this changing world. So what does this changing world do? A lot of new technology, right? Lots of new competition and cooperation. That's why you're seeing whole different players of the market, from NVIDIA, GM, Uber, I'm missing some of the names, the tip of my tongue, all joining together in trying to make the software along with the hardware, along with the automobile. So along with this change, at the same time, the car industry has made some promises to the NHTSA, as for example, in terms of automotive, automatic braking, or they're working on backup cameras, which are going to be, not just, it's going to be sort of a mirror, it's going to be a backup camera with suddenly safety comes in front and center. Let me also say this, as we go to the autonomous car, the electric car, suddenly safety comes in front and center. Many new parts of the car that we didn't think of as E&E will suddenly become electronics and electrical, and suddenly will get into the scope of safety. All right? All right, let's go on. What is changing then? The amount of hardware and software inside a vehicle is changing. Look at this change from, over 3 different versions of a car. Look at the number of ECUs, CAN messages, CAN signals inside a car. And folks, that is going to show a steep upward curve as we look ahead. And what else is happening? The amount of electronic content is going up in cars, a dramatic shift from 2010 from 30% to 50%. Now we understand why suddenly, software suppliers and, hardware suppliers are all coming into the industry, including semiconductor companies who gave up on automotive, are all making a quick beeline to come back in. I thought it's not that funny, but I thought I'd just show this AAA comment at the bottom that the folks trying to fix these new vehicles cannot fix them because it's become quite complicated. So drivers are getting stranded, and you can also see suddenly software is coming to take blame for 15% of car recalls. And folks, you saw this very clearly in the Boeing current news with Boeing, which is a functional safety issue, and it's a software issue. Software and hardware overriding. The sensor is giving the wrong signal, and the plane is going up, the plane is going down. All right? And the controllability factor, which is very simple, where the pilot could have just turned off the system and taken controls, didn't know that they could do that, right? So 15% of warranty recalls are now software related. As you well know, 26262 has squarely hit semiconductors, and there's a Part 12 guidance for semiconductor companies. Let's go away from the slide with the thought here that typically in mechanical systems, you have single point faults that we actually do in the FMEA. Now, with the multi-point fault tree analysis as a tool really is something we're all going to have to get used to, because this is what happens when you have electronics, hardware, and software in a vehicle. So what did we see? We saw the embedded software and functional safety make some inroads into the IATF, what we predict is much more in the future, software and functional safety will become key themes that go into the IATF 16949. What else is happening with this key and critical change? Suddenly, these standards that your company was not familiar with, now you need to start becoming familiar with it. One of them is ISO 26262. And if you say, well, you know what, we don't have safety products, and I can tell you right now, when you go into autonomous cars and electric cars, your product will soon become part of the autonomous driving, autonomous steering, electric, battery system, something of that sort that will require 26262. And if you're not doing software today, you better learn how to do hardware and software if you want to be a part of this industry supply chain. And you need to know ASPICE, which is a requirement from Ford and requirement from the European OEM. The IATF 16949 requires a disciplined process for software, and you had a choice of ASPICE or CMMI. Of course, with this many customers saying ASPICE, just take it as a given that it's ASPICE, okay? Let's leave this second part of this webinar with these announcements. There are some structural changes needed in the management system. One, due to the amount of new technology in electronics and software, there are many new entrants to the automotive supply chain. Many new entrants. Software and design-only organizations require a rethinking of the IATF scheme. We cannot just only certify companies at sites in remote locations. You're going to have many new suppliers who are very critical to the automotive car, which are only design only. So nobody's talked about it yet. This change will happen, and maybe 1 or 2 years from now, I'll tell you, I told you so. All right. Since I don't know if I mentioned to you, I think I did mention to you about the semiconductor supplement. So Omnex has helped every Silicon Valley company from NVIDIA to Atmel to AMD. You name the company, Intel, we have worked with them. And now where was I going with this? Some of them, like NVIDIA and O2 Micro, and do not have any manufacturing at all. And they're huge companies with major players in the automotive industry. So they're not IATF certified. And they have to be IATF certified. So this is a change that's going to be needed. Third bullet. There are new standards, AIAG VDA FMEA. It might be just, a coincidence that it happened at this time. But I can tell you right now, it's coming at a great time for the industry. I'll explain to you in the next segment. AIAG VDA FMEA, ISO 26262, ASPICE, SORTIF, and Cybersecurity are the new standards that are going to come in, who will then influence IATF 16949. So we'll segue next after this slide. It is the last slide in this section, and I was challenging all of you and saying, what? Are you not a safety product? Just about everybody who's doing anything anymore is got safety products, meaning as the car industry, goes into electric and autonomous, the suppliers will have to start producing products that supplies autonomous cars and electric cars. By the way, if you don't see any change to your product and your product mix, it may be an indication that you're in a dying market, and it may need to have a product change, a product mix. Even Omnex is taking on functional safety design. We have started a division that's going to be looking at functional safety design with SOTIF and ASPICE and cybersecurity, because this is what our customers are asking us to help them with. And we think it'll make us better in doing implementations in doing something like that. All right. So now we segue to the third segment, and I am going to pause again for 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, I'll pause for 2 minutes because you're not going to be able to write things if I don't pause. So let's pause here for 2 minutes and see what kind of questions you have. I see a lot of questions here already. Folks, if you're not hearing anything, I'm purposely pausing to give you time to ask questions, write questions down in the questions area of the GoToWebinar. All right, let us continue now then with the next and final segment of this webinar, where I'll also talk to you about AIAG VDA, but that was on the title, and I want to make sure we give you the latest news on AIAG VDA. Okay, so really, the third segment is really about supply chain standards. And I'll say this, as we go towards, autonomous and electric, suddenly you see the idea of the V. And the V is about the system development that passes requirements to hardware, and then from hardware to software, and the testing needs to follow this V back up. If you didn't know this, this is important you know this, and that there's 2 V's for hardware and software. If you're the systems developer and you're giving hardware outside the company and software outside the company, now you guys need to be working together. Do you understand that? That's why we're calling you a supply chain standard. That this level of cooperation has not been there in the automotive industry, and so we are going to need to change the way we work. So this then is ISO 26262. This is SOTIF, the safety of the intended function. Safety of the intended function. That spells SOTIF. Let me just segue here. If I'm not mistaken, I had it opened here. Here is a page out of the SOTIF standard, and you'll see here that anytime you see the word PAS 21448, if the performance limitations to the functional design, or misuse to the functional design, or something from the car surroundings, other users, environmental conditions, electromagnetic interference, all of that will affect the function. And you need to do not only 26262, you also need to do 21448. Now, what about cybersecurity? Cybersecurity, folks, is the scariest part of things, where people will successfully attack and exploit the vehicle security vulnerability. Now, cybersecurity is unlike the SOTIF and the 26262, because the people trying to do malicious attacks are going to keep changing the way and become more and more sophisticated, which means the car company, the car that's out there for 10, 12 years, needs to be modified on an ongoing basis. So it really calls for downloads of software in a very easy way from the customer to the car, car driver. There are some major implications here because of the way the car is going to be in the future. Okay, so SOTIF, we need to be thinking about. Oh, the point here of SOTIF is, do you see it's a V? And there are two small V's for hardware and software. So SOTIF completely integrates with 26262. Here is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is also a V. It does not integrate with 26262. It has to be done in parallel, but the requirements, there's a cause and effect relationship with the cybersecurity threat as a cause to the effect on a functionality. So, it's a very exciting times for all of us in that we'll be breaking new ground into thinking about this and how to deal with it and how to integrate this back into our new product development process. Folks, the worst things we can do is to create silos around each of these and do duplicative work, which is inherently inefficient, and not only inefficient, but also will cause structural issues in design. So we have the SAE J3061, and we're one of the writers of that is a member of Omnex, and is also a member of this new standard. And I'll just go back because of all the different names. Not the past. In fact, I don't see there it is. ISO 21. I myself I have a copy of the draft, but these are some new standards, which is the cybersecurity standard. That's the ISO cybersecurity standard that is being developed as we speak. Right. All right. So what is the point here? There are new standards to deal with the way the product is changing. What product? The vehicle that's going into electric cars and autonomous cars need 26262, needs SOTIF, and needs cybersecurity. And of course, because there's so much software now in a car, we need to put disciplined processes into software development that we call SPICE. Okay, Automotive SPICE. All right. One of these supply chain standards that's going to be impacting us in the very near future is actually AIAG VDA. So folks, one of the changes has been the 7th step, results documentation. Our experts here, Greg and Mike Down, Greg Ruska and Mike Down, tell us that the results documentation step was always there, but has become now more explicit. So here, folks, are the 7 steps. Let's go take a look at step 2, structure analysis, which is going from the car all the way to a component. What we don't see here, and we don't see in AIAG, in just the VDA, is that VDA FMEA, is they don't show software and hardware. So they also need to understand the car is more than mechanical, as hardware and software, and it'll have to be put into the structure. What is the point I'm making here? That the AIAG VDA is essentially a supply chain tool, right? That connects up customers, suppliers, and their suppliers, sub-suppliers. Same thing with the failure analysis. There's a cause and effect relationship between each level, but in the end of the day, it goes all the way down, the supply chain. So AIAG VDA is part of this change of going into supply chain standards. So let me share with you some updates on the AIAG VDA. The US OEMs were holdouts. Ford agreed first, and recently GM and FCA have also agreed. There will be some CSRs that let's wait and see. We believe it will say that the FMEA will be optional. We definitely know that the AIAG VDA FMEA will be optional. We definitely expect that from the GM side. All right, let's continue. We do believe with where the standard is today is getting translated, there is some work still that needs to be done, and but it's very minor work. The standard is already being translated, and with our expectations are that this standard will come out in May. What are some key changes? When we looked at the standard in November revision, we saw that the SOD tables had been revised. Recently, they added a 7th step. This is a 7th step, folks. It's really a communication of actions taken to reduce risk, and we can ourselves decide. So it's like a should, recommended. We can decide how we want to do it. Executive summary, scope of the FMEA, what are the tables we use, what are the recommended actions, as we call action priority, what is the action priority list, results and conclusions of the analysis, right? And documentation of actions also need to have the effectiveness. The content of the documentation fulfills the requirements of the organization, the intended reader, and the relevant stakeholders, and so on, okay? Now, I saw one of the questions was you wanted to know more about the AIAG VDA FMEA. We have Mike Down, who was the chairman of the 4th edition committee, who's now actively working in the SAE FMEA standard, who will be doing a webinar on how to be prepared for the new AIAG VDA FMEA. Folks, it's a major change for all of us. And the supply chain standards as a whole, require key changes in our own quality management system. One is a good idea of your architecture of how you gather requirements. And so Omnex would say your product is defined by functions. Functions have requirements. Requirements have characteristics. Okay? Characteristics get controlled in the assembly plant and the manufacturing plant. Functions and requirements help us very carefully come up with design failure modes, and these same then come up with causes. And then, of course, when you're doing for hardware failures, one of the metrics is 100% coverage of what they call the single point failures. So you need to have what is called safety mechanisms and or safety measures. Okay. So where am I going with this? The idea of having a clear architecture of how you gather requirements, and these requirements then get decomposed into subsystems, hardware and software. Why do you need that? Why do you need system requirements? Why do you need hardware requirements? Why do you need unit software requirements and then module software requirements? Well, that's the way you test. If you don't have requirements like that, you cannot meet the requirements of the V. All right? Then what else do we need to add in to our quality management system? Configuration management is not currently included in the IATF 16949. It's definitely there in ASPICE. ASPICE, which looks at software and system, it is something we need to think about, our companies need to do. And then we need to have supply chain coordination between ourselves, our customer, and our suppliers and their suppliers. So you can imagine then, with the fault tree analysis and the requirements flow down, suddenly we can identify a problem and trace the root cause down to its element. And folks, our thoughts are the only good way to handle all this is to have software for management systems. It'll play a key role in integrating the supply chain. So I'm actually a little bit ahead of my time, so let me pause here. And I have two last slides as a summary, okay? And what I'll do here is also maybe pause and allow you to ask questions, and maybe I'll answer some of your questions before we do the last two key slides, okay? So one of the questions that's being asked is, what does the VDA stand for? So VDA is an organization just like AIAG in Germany. And folks, it is a long German word, and I don't quite recall the whole name. Just like I cannot say the HIS is a scope for ASPICE, which has been changed to actually, they're calling it the VDA scope now in ASPICE. HIS is also a long German word. So VDA is a long German word standing for the Association of Vehicle Manufacturers in Germany, and they're equivalent to the AIAG. In my organization, Internet IoT 4.0 is being implemented. Do we need to include failure modes related to this in our PFMEAs? Let me think about that. When you say IoT 4.0, Karina, it's not clear to me what you're doing for Internet of Things and if it's affecting your product, okay? On the other hand, let me think again. Will it go into your PFMEA? Yes, it could go into your PFMEA because the IoT may be vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks. And your IoT then might be just like a overhead crane. You know, it could be a cause of something going down, okay, in your plant. So from that viewpoint, I think it may be important, or I need to know a little bit more of what you're trying to do. So, question here: how do you see what is happening with the Boeing 737? Looking at that 737, you know, I don't claim to. I'm going to wait for Mr. Greg Ruska to do a deep dive, as he usually does with these kinds of things. But looking at it, very clear, it's a functional safety measure that, and they put a functional safety device in that is really supposed to improve things, but they only put one sensor in. And I'm not going to say, because the aerospace, if it was ISO 26262, we would clearly be able to tell you what failed. The aerospace industry has a different standard. And but if it is ISO 26262, what we could say is that, you know, there was no redundancy. I don't know what we call the fit rate, what the fit rate was going to be. It looks to me that the fit rate, either it's a SOTF issue. What is a SOTF issue? So I'll get a chance to talk to you about SOTF. All right. So I'm working with a customer who has got a sensor in the car seat, and the sensor is supposed to let the airbag know if it's a child or if it's a adult. Well, the question goes, the unintended consequence: what if a child carries a box heavy enough to make it indicate it's a child? I mean, it's an adult. Okay, it's a functional issue. Second functional issue is they may be going through bumps where the sensor may not be sitting right on the sensor. How does the system interpret that? That's more of an environmental issue. You see that? A third one is, what if two children sit in the front seat? Like it can happen many times, right? So all from this one little sensor, we can come up with 10, 15 different scenarios that we didn't think about, that needs to be thought about for us to make sure the airbag doesn't go off when it shouldn't, and that it does go off when it should, okay? So in that fashion, this is the issue here. It's either environmental issues or unintended consequences of how it was designed, where that sensor is sensing something it should not. Let me give you the example of the Uber example. I don't know if you know about the fatality, and I forget it has been analyzed to a great extent. The system actually recognized the person crossing the street, but the system filtered it out because it's getting so many signals, good and bad signals. Though it recognized it, it was filtered out. Where I told the car you can just go right ahead, and then of course it hit the person crossing the street. All right, so that's a little bit on that issue there. Will total productive maintenance fall in the categories of product safety and embedded software and software systems? I cannot see TPM falling into product safety. Remember, the product safety is to do with the product itself and embedded software. TPM is a system in the plant to keep our machines up and running. Now, Omnex is implementing something called TPM 4.0, which is Internet of Things. We're putting sensors into every piece of equipment to let the plant know, like an andon light, what's running, what's not running. And of course, we're also putting in sensors to measure, process characteristics that affect product characteristics. Aha, now I'm getting some ideas. So the process characteristics that affect product characteristics could well go into the control plan and hence go into the FMEA, okay? But it will not become a part of product safety. I'm not thinking of it right now, how TPM could get into product safety or embedded software. Let's go on. Let me just take a couple more questions. As sort of impacted fully the IATF 16949 or the ISO standards. We started working with ISO 26262 in 2009. 2011 was when the standard first came out. So it was a gap of 2 years. So slowly we started seeing 26262 in the RFQs. But I do believe because the industry is that much smarter today, sort of cybersecurity is already being asked. They're not asking for this cybersecurity SAE standard, but it just came out. So the cybersecurity standard will soon start citing this SAE standard and then the ISO standard. The 26262 people, soon as they learn and understand sort of, it's inevitable. You have to do sort of if you have safety issues, okay? You cannot leave sort of out, or you'll have an undefined function with unintended consequences. So sort of is going to become a normal everyday thing, okay? Let me just take a look at this. Folks, let me go back and finish the last 2 slides, and then what we'll do is come back and take the rest of the questions, all right? So what are the key changes needed in the automotive industry today? Number 1, changes in your new product development process. What is the paradigm shift needed? Our whole industry is mechanical focused, or if it's a hardware company, or when I work with you, the tier 1s, the hardware is the boss. Nope, not anymore. What? I don't mean to say it in a bad way. I didn't like the way I sounded. But systems engineering is the boss in the design. And we have to suddenly take a systems engineering focus and have to come up with a way to flow down requirements, all right? So this is also why the AIAG VDA FMEA cannot just be functions. It has to be functions and requirements, folks. because the industry is going towards system requirements, subsystem requirements, hardware requirements, software requirements. And requirements are functional requirements. So functions, requirements, and as I said, characteristics, because we're going to have to finally manufacture it. Not in software, but in hardware and systems and so on. All right. What else do we need to say? That we have to go to a systems orientation and a focus on requirements. Software engineering is now oftentimes, and I've seen this in the last 10, 15 years, let's say 10, 12 years, I've seen the software groups grow larger and larger and larger, and yet be treated as an outsider, as an afterthought. Software engineering needs to be firmly embraced and integrated into the new product development. All right? Software design needs to integrate with the management system, including 26262, ASPICE, and Agile. If you don't know what Agile is, sorry to bring a new acronym yet. Most software companies are operating in Agile. And you may or may not know, Omnex has talked about Agile APQP. Agile needs to work out of the just software design, just software, hardware, and system design. This is what great companies in the world are doing today. So when we make this change, we need to look at what is called Agile at scale. If you want to know more about Agile, Mike Popinis of Omnex did a webinar on this just recently. If you're into new product development, or if you are in quality designing systems, you need to go listen to that webinar. All right. So what are we saying? New product development process has to be restructured to accommodate this 26262 ASPICE Agile linkage and needs to align with it. The same will need to be performed with cybersecurity and SOTA. So a big change in new product development. The other big change has got to be with how we deal with suppliers. Right now, SQEs, for good purposes, folks, moved from quality into purchasing. Now, they need to also move maybe back into engineering, or maybe there's going to be engineering supplier quality, and then there'll be purchasing supplier quality. Maybe I haven't fully thought it out in my mind, but functionally, we need to rethink how we manage supply chain. And there has to be coordinated design, and there needs to be something called a distributed interface agreement that clearly spells out who does what, and ASILs need to be communicated. So if what I told you today, many of these terms are really new to you, it is a sign that your team and your group and yourself need to change and learn where this industry is going and what are some of the key things that you're going to need for your own competency as the industry goes towards electric and autonomous. All right. We'll do this last slide, and then we'll come back as time allows. We ask more questions. So, what can we say? Great job, IAOB and IATF and AIAG and all the AIAGs globally for a successful launch and certification process. And congratulations to all of you who have been certified. And as we said, IATF 16949 and ISO 9001 represents a major change for many organizations. This is the biggest change since QS 9000. We also said quality organizations need to use this opportunity to rethink their management system and prepare for the next 20 years. But I have to tell you, 2 years ago when I wrote that, I did not quite catch the significance of what is happening in the industry and the major change that does need to happen yet with your management systems. And I do believe, which I don't say in the bullets here, integrated management systems and software needs to be a key part of how you need to come up with supply chain software along with the supply chain standards. Second bullet, there are indications that the surveillance audit will uncover some major issues. So plan ahead and do prevention. Third, these new supply chain standards will impact your management system and require close coordination of customers and the suppliers. Next, AIAG VDA FMEA will be probably released in May of this year, and you need to start thinking about how you're going to become ready for it. And so join us for that webinar. And we're also going to be doing another ISO 26262 webinar from our experts. Both will be done by expert Omnex subject matter experts, and we welcome you to join there. Let me do a couple of things here in terms of letting you know about books that I don't find time to write anymore. New certification courses coming from Omnex, so cybersecurity and SOTIF. Our IATF 16949 courses. Key is, if you don't have product auditors, process auditors, and VDA 6.3 auditors, please be aware. We're adding many different courses in this supply chain standards that we believe the industry needs. Our core tools courses and our upcoming open enrollment training. So we do training on site, open enrollment, and of course, we're happy to do, work with you on implementations, because that's really what is a lot of fun for a lot of us. So with that, let me go on to more questions that you have. Can we get a copy of the non-conformances? Yes, you can get a copy of it. It'll be in the presentation. I perform internal audits for clients, and I'm seeing a significant number of incorrect or inconsistent interpretations of the standard by external auditors. Are we seeing that? One of the things that have happened to me is that I am not as hands-on these days as I used to be. I still do a handful of audits, but when people complain about things like that, I'm not the one that they're complaining. They're complaining to others they're working closer to at Omnex. But I'll tell you this, we are seeing a number of non-conformances when we go to audit. If you have Omnex come in and do an internal audit, we're going to find a lot of stuff, okay? That's just the way, that's what happens, in terms of, if you want to have really clean system, you want to take a good look, that's what we're finding. I need to understand major changes from current FMEA to new VDA FMEA. Join the webinar by Mike Down, our SME, subject matter expert in AIAG VDA FMEA, and he'll share that with you. Okay, we'll go on to the next one here. Are the noted rankings of findings also take into account issues and risks for the OEMs? Tom, actually, that's data that they have not shared with us. This is just what are the top majors and top minors by number of non-conformances. And keep in mind, there's a significant number of non-conformances that are being given in every audit, but maybe not as much as they could, which I believe will come out in the surveillance audits. What does SOTIF stand for? Safety of the intended function, SOTIF, okay? Or a novel acronym, right? Has SOTIF impacted fully the IATF? So I think I have answered that question earlier. Let me go and see if there's any new questions in the bottom. Where do we get the ISO 26262 standard? That 2,000 pages, by the way. It's an ISO standard, so you can get it from the ISO body. It's about $1,000. It's about 12 different, and we do training, we do certification training on it on a regular basis. We do also overview training on a regular basis. Please join us. What is the current time frame for the AIAG VDA FMEA? We expect it to be out by May, latest June. Could you please post the slide? I do believe, that will happen. Now, tire pressure monitoring system. Yes, tire pressure is indeed part of functional safety, and there's all kinds of different safety systems now suddenly coming into ISO 26262. Next question, how do you incorporate supply chain management with directed suppliers who are non-compliant? Yes. It is a major problem in the industry where the customer directs us to use a supplier who's one of the biggest problems we have, right? It is a problem indeed that many of you have complained about. I do understand, but it's one of the things we're going to have to handle as an industry. Okay. Thank you, Beatrice. She's a clear idea of what's happening. Is Omnex VDA 6.3 process audits training sufficient to perform internal VDA audits? It's really a question you need to ask your customer, Darko. And so when we do the ASPICE audits, one of the things we'll do is we'll get an ASPICE lead auditor, and all of us will have the certification to do the ASPICE audits. Okay, so VDA 6.3, I do believe you can do internal audits, but talk to your customer. Somebody else asked me about this Annex B. I'm going to hold that off for now because I don't have the IATF 16949 handy with me right now. Okay, you can maybe email us and we'll take it offline. All right, folks, thank you very much. I hope you found the webinar helpful and meaningful for you. And as I mentioned to you, we're going to be doing a couple of webinars as we go forward. All Omnex webinars are focused on what are the changes in the industry and how to make you a more successful company. We look forward to you joining us on future webinars, attending our trainings, or having us help you with your management system. Folks, thank you all very much. Take care now. Bye-bye.